James Bond, 007, a member of the elite MI6 British military intelligence. But how many of you know he was created right here in Canada? Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. The year was 1942, and the war wasn't going well for the Allies. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill had appointed William Stevenson, a businessman from Winnipeg, as the Chief of Canadian Chief of British Security Coordination. His role was twofold. He was to gather intelligence throughout the Americas and make sure that it made it back to London, and he was to find a way to turn the tide of the war. His suggestion was a spy school, a place where they would train a group of specialized operatives who would be sent behind enemy lines to do whatever was necessary to blow up munitions factories, supply trains, gather intelligence information to ensure that the airstrikes were more effective. But where to put it? First thought, of course, was in England. But the Nazis were right across the channel. And if England fell, the school would be lost, as would the rest of the world. But it had to be on British soil. So where else but here in Canada? British soil, British subjects, and an ocean away. Now the British, they assumed that given the hectares of open space that Canada has, that it would be somewhere up in the far reaches up north. But Bill Stevenson had a different idea. Nestled on the north shore of Lake Ontario, just outside of the city of Whitby, is where he located the most secret base in the war. Now you're probably wondering, how could you keep this base a secret when it's right outside of Whitby, just a few miles down the road from the largest city in the country, and it had a Canadian National Rail line running through it, only in Canada. They invited the press for a tour. They brought them in before the base opened. They showed them the barracks. They showed them the mess hall, all the things you'd normally find on a military base. They said, don't worry if you hear explosions. We're just testing some ordnance. Oh, and that radio tower over there, yeah, we're leasing that out to the CBC. The press left the base, assured that they had all of the facts, and didn't ask any further questions. It was to this base, to Camp X, that Ian Fleming came, Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, along with his colleagues, for a 12-week intensive training program. They were trained on Morse code. They were trained to repair their own radios because once they were in Europe, they were on their own. They were trained in hand-to-hand combat and in all the weapons of the day. And they received daily ordnance training. Now, if you can imagine, having a military base so close to the city of Whitby, you can expect some pushback from the community. But they were certainly best friends with all of the used car dealers. Because what they would do, every morning, somebody would go from the base, go to a used car lot, and buy an old beater, and they'd bring it back to the base. They would gather their students together, and they would show them how to set explosives. This was the early days of plastic explosions. Long before there were timers and cell phone detonators, the scientists at Station M, which was located in the basement of Casa Loma, had created a spark stick. And they taught them how to put the spark stick into the plastic explosives. They had 15 seconds to get away. So they would plant it, they would run to a waiting Jeep, hop in the Jeep and drive up to the top of the hill and watch the car explode. Happened every single day. So what happened to Ian Fleming over the course of his training? The last assignment he received was an intelligence briefing that there was an enemy agent who was holed up in a local farmhouse. And his mission was to go and kill him. Fleming went, he breached the farmhouse, made his way into the hallway upstairs, and stood for quite a time, and then walked away. Later, he met Bill Stevenson at a party after the war and apologized for his behavior. And he was told not to worry about it because that was the point of the assignment, was to find out if the person was ruthless enough to do what they needed to do. Because if they couldn't, then they were putting not only that person, but their colleagues at risk. And what of Camp X? Of the original 200 acres, 18 acres remain. The land was, when it was decommissioned after the Cold War, was given to the city of Whitby, and they incorporated it into their municipal plan. The remaining 18 acres of environmentally sensitive land is now Intrepid Park, in honor of Sir William Stevenson, whose code name was Intrepid. There's a rocky beach where sentries once stood to ensure that no threat came from the water. There's a crater where no wildflowers will grow, the soil so damaged by the daily ordnance training. And there's a monument to the 500 men and women who were deployed from Camp X, only 240 of whom made it home. These were brave men and women who knew that their risk of survival was slim, and they went anyway. For the survivors, for the remainder of their lives, they were not able to talk about their experiences or be acknowledged for their service because they were bound by the Official Secrets Act. Those survivors are all gone now, but I ask you, on November 11th, at 11 o'clock in that moment of silence, remember the men and women of Camp X.